We're going to talk about group data and how to create a frequency distribution table. Here we have the ages of 50 people. With this information we are going to create a frequency distribution table. As the first step, we're going to identify what the minimum value and the maximum value are. That is, the minimum age and the maximum age. We can observe that the youngest is 10 years old and the oldest is 73 years old. Once these values are defined, we can now calculate the range. The range is very easy to calculate. We just need to subtract the minimum value from the maximum value. This means we have a range of 63 years between the youngest and the oldest. Now we can calculate the number of intervals. Remember that these are group data because we're going to use intervals. But first, we need to determine how many intervals there will be. There are several ways to calculate the number of intervals. We have two formulas. In both, we need the value of n. N is 50 because it's the number of data, that is the number of people surveyed. Of these two formulas, the easiest one is this, because it only involves taking the square root of n, the square root of 50. The result is approximately 7. We need to write it because the number of intervals is a whole number. We calculate this with the first equation. We can use the second formula. This is a Sturge's rule. By replacing n with a value of 50, we will also get a result of approximately 7 intervals. So you can use either of these two formulas. I will go with this one. Now we are going to calculate the width of the intervals, the class width. The class width is very simple to calculate. What I will do is take the range and divide it by the number of intervals. I know that my age range is 63 years. And I need to distribute those 63 years into 7 intervals of equal width. I do the division. 63 divided by 7, that's 9, and that means each interval will have 9 years between its lower limit and upper limit. Now we are going to build the table. The variable x for me in this case is age, and I place 7 rows because there are 7 intervals. The first interval starts from the minimum value, 10 years. The class width is 9, which means the first interval goes from 10 to 19 years. But be careful with the following. We use a bracket on them because we are going to include those who are 10 years old. I place a parenthesis on 19 because I'm not going to count those who are 19 years old. Those who are 19 years old will be counted in the next interval. Here we include those who are from 19 to less than 28 years old. Here I don't count those who are 28 years old. The next interval would be from 28 to 37, because 28 plus 9 is 37. Here we count those who are 28 years old, but we don't count those who are 37. Look, I keep adding 9 by 9 until the end. The last interval must include the maximum value. The maximum value is 73 years old, and that is where we finish. Here we must count the data for 73 years old, and that's why we use bracket at the end. Remember, when it has a bracket, it means that value is included. When it has parentheses, it's open, meaning that I don't include it. Now we are going to build our second column, the class mark. The class mark is simply the midpoint of each interval. So, what value is exactly in the middle between 10 and 19? It's very easy to calculate. 10 plus 19. Then I divide it by 2 and that is 14.5. I do the same for all intervals. I add the limits and the result I divide by 2. Now let's move on to the next column, which is the absolute frequency. The absolute frequency is simply counting. So let's count. How many people are between 10 and 19 years old? Not counting 19. Let's see, here we have 5 people. The ones who are 19 are not counted. This 19 is not included. The 19 is counted in the next interval. I put 5 here. I analyze the next interval between 19 and 28. Here we have the 11 people who are 19 or older but are younger than 28. The next interval between 28 and 37 has 8 people. I analyze the next interval. There are 5 people. Here I have another 8 who are 46 or older but younger than 55. There are another 6 between 55 and less than 64. And finally there are 7 between 64 and 73, including 73. I can calculate the sum of the absolute frequencies and it must be 50. If I get a different number, it means something is wrong and I need to count again. Let's move on to the next column, cumulative absolute frequency. It's very easy to calculate. I take 5 and add the next 11. Now I have a total of 16. If I add this 8, I reach 24. And if I add this 5, I'll have 29. Finally, the total will be 50. Now let's talk about relative frequency. What is the relationship between each absolute frequency and the total? That relationship is the relative frequency. We will take each absolute frequency and divide it by the total. I divide this 5 by the total, 50, that gives 0.1, and if I multiply by 100 I get 10%, and that is the relative frequency. This 5 corresponds to a 10% relationship of the total. 5 is 10% of 50. That is the relationship, that is the relative frequency. I divide this 11 by 50, that gives 0.22, and if I multiply by 100 I get 22%. 8 divided by 50 equals 16%, and I continue like that with the rest. Let's go to the next column, cumulative relative frequency. It's very easy, it's just adding. We start with the first relative frequency and I keep adding the next one. With this we can say that we have finished building our frequency distribution table.